spectrum frontiers, riding hard, standing tall, from the heart of the people to the rise and the fall. Full spectrum frontiers, where the stories ignite, guarding tomorrow with grit in the fight.
All right, let's talk about something that most people shrug off as just another Washington drama. And that's the government shutdown. You hear it on the news, see it on your feed, and think, yeah, they'll figure it out eventually. But here's the thing. Every day that shutdown drags on, it's not just bureaucrats missing paychecks or museums closing. It's a slow bleed in the one area we can't afford to get sloppy, and that's national security. Now, before we go full doom and gloom, it's not, let's keep this grounded. America's not collapsing. Marines aren't suddenly taking IOUs for ammunition. But when key agencies like the National Nuclear Security Administration start furloughing staff and critical testing programs go on ice, that's not a symbolic pause. That's capability decay. That's readiness quietly slipping out the back door while politicians argue over who left the lights on. And it's not just defense labs or think tanks feeling the strain. Air traffic controllers working unpaid, that's an accident waiting for a headline. Diplomats cut off from the communication flow. That's a blind spot in real-time geopolitics. And you better believe Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran are all watching, not with popcorn, but with calculators, measuring our dysfunction, testing for fractures. Here's what we'll unpack today. How the shutdown quietly chips away at operational readiness from nuclear oversight to cyber defense. How it projects weakness abroad and gives our adversaries a free strategic readout on American disunity. And finally, how the defense industrial base, which is the backbone of U.S. modernization, is starting to feel the strain in contracts, in oversight, and in innovation. This is not about politics. This is about power, perception, and preparedness. And if you care about where America stands in the next decade, you need to understand how this kind of bureaucratic paralysis plays out on the battlefield of global competition. So grab some coffee, clear your head, and let's break down what happens when the greatest superpower in the world has to put its own defense on out of office. If you're new here, this is Full Spectrum Frontiers. I'm Bennett Tanton, Marine and Army veteran. I'm a national security nerd and your guide through the intersection of conflict, culture, and common sense. If you enjoy the show, hit that follow button, share it with a friend who still thinks the shutdown is just about paychecks, and leave a quick review. It helps us reach more people who want to understand the world, not just react to it. Section 1. Readiness on pause. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. The American military machine doesn't stop spinning because politicians can't agree on a budget. But what does happen, slowly, quietly, is erosion. See, the gears keep turning, but they start grinding. Maintenance cycles stretch. Weapons testing schedules slip. Civilian experts, the ones running nuclear oversight, logistics planning, and cyber defense, get furloughed. That's not a minor inconvenience. That's muscle atrophy in the world's most complex defense organism. Take the National Security Administration, for example. They're the people who make sure our nuclear deterrent actually works. Not just the warheads themselves, but the aging facilities, the reactors, the engineers, making sure a Cold War relic doesn't turn into a modern-day liability. When those experts go home because Congress can't pass a continuing resolution, deterrence doesn't exactly stop. But the safety checks, modernization programs, and testing protocols, they stall out. Every day they're away is a day we gamble our legacy systems and deferred maintenance. Now, zoom out to the cyber realm. Another invisible battlefield, the Department of Homeland Security and its subagencies like CISA are critical in detecting and mitigating cyber intrusions. A shutdown doesn't turn off the firewalls, but it does send home analysts, slows response times, and leave our networks slightly more vulnerable. That's all the adversary like China or Russia needs. A few more seconds to lag, a little less oversight, and a window cracks open. Even in the skies above us, the effects ripple. Remember, air traffic controllers and TSA workers are federal employees. They don't stop working during shutdowns. They just stop getting paid. Morale drops, fatigue sets in, and safety takes a hit. The FAA has already warned that prolonged shutdowns risk degrading air safety oversight. It's not exactly comforting to think the people keeping thousands of planes from colliding are doing it under financial stress and burnout. Here's what gets missed in most headlines. Readiness isn't a switch you can just flip back on. It's a continuum, a rhythm of planning, testing, training, and maintenance that can't be paused without consequence. When you break that rhythm, there's a lag time to restart it. Equipment inspections delayed today might mean readiness shortfalls months from now. Funding disruptions for training pipelines mean fewer qualified operators down the line. And let's talk about human capital, the backbone of any defense apparatus. The best and brightest scientists, engineers, and analysts can only tolerate so many cycles of uncertainty before they bail for private sector jobs. When a shutdown becomes routine, it sends a signal. This system is unreliable. That kind of message doesn't just bleed talent, it weakens institutional memory. The irony here is brutal. We spend trillions to build the world's most advanced defense infrastructure, and yet we can still cripple it without firing a shot, just by not signing a budget. I'm not saying the system collapses overnight. It doesn't. But what we're seeing is a slow motion version of a strategic own goal. It's not dramatic enough for a movie, but it's devastating in the long term, like corrosion into steel. You don't see it until the structure fails. So when you hear the phrase non-essential staff furloughed, understand that there's nothing non-essential about the people keeping their deterrence credible, or our deterrence credible, or networks secure, or our supply chains functioning. They just happen to be invisible until their absence starts to show in the form of missing deadlines, delayed launches, or data breaches. I mean, we've been here before. Every shutdown comes with a cost, but the longer it drags on, the higher the interest we pay in readiness debt. And when it comes due, we won't get to renegotiate. Section 2, the optics of dysfunction. Here's the part that most Americans don't think about. What a government shutdown looks like from the outside. When we think shutdown, we picture DC, gridlock. Maybe some federal workers holding signs, and the cable news anchors arguing about who's to blame. But from Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, it looks like a stress test. And believe me, they're taking notes. Because to them, every minute of dysfunction is a live demonstration of our internal weaknesses. It's not just about budgets. It's about reliability. Imagine you're an adversary watching the most powerful country in the world paralyze itself over its own operating costs. Let me say that again. The most powerful country in the world paralyzing itself over its own operating costs. You'd think, if they can't pay their own employees on time, can they sustain a two-front conflict? Can they coordinate a cyber response? Can they even pass a defense? They can't even pass a defense bill when it matters. This is where the real battle begins, in perception. Let's start with China. Beijing doesn't need to hack every system to gain leverage. Sometimes all it needs is to watch us trip over our own bureaucracy. Chinese state media has already begun painting the shutdown as evidence that democracy is inefficient and unstable. It's propaganda gold. Perfect contrast to their message of centralized efficiency and control. Gold. And while we might laugh it off, that narrative lands hard in developing nations where Beijing's Belt and Road project are buying influence. America's brand takes a hit, one fiscal standoff at a time. Then there's Russia. Masters of opportunism. For Moscow, dysfunction equals distraction. A shutdown means delayed aid packages, fewer diplomatic maneuvers, and a distracted intelligence community. That's prime time for probing NATO's edges, testing cyber defenses, and pushing disinformation into American social feeds. I mean, remember, Putin doesn't need to beat the U.S. militarily. He just needs to convince the world that we're beating ourselves. And then there's Iran. They see a shutdown as a crack in the armor. And when Washington can't project unity, Tehran feels emboldened to test limits. Whether that's in the Strait of Hormuz, through proxy militias, or in nuclear posturing, weakness, even perceived weakness, shifts the deterrence equation. But this isn't just about adversaries. I mean, allies are watching too. And they're freaking worried. A government that can't fund itself consistently sends ripples through every mutual defense agreement. Period. Partners start wondering if Washington shuts down, do commitments shut down too? For smaller NATO nations or Pacific allies like Japan and South Korea, reliability, it means everything. And you know what really hurts? The shutdown tells the world that America's greatest threat isn't external, it's internal. I've been saying this for years. It's not the hypersonic missiles or the cyber armies or even economic competition that worries most of our allies. It's our political self-sabotage. Now, don't mistake this for defeatism. I'm not saying the American experiment is crumbling. What I am saying is that perception shapes power. The Cold War was won not just with nukes and numbers, but because we were confident, competent, and consistent. If we erode those three things from the inside out, we don't need enemies to weaken us. The good news, this is fixable. The bad news, it's not a problem that money alone can solve. You can't fund unity. You can only build it. So the political theater drags on. The world is watching to see whether America remembers what made it formidable in the first place. Not its wealth, not its weapons, but its will to function when everything else is chaos. In the next section, we're going to dig into the economic bloodstream that keeps that will alive, the defense industrial base. When the shutdown hits that system, the effects go far beyond contracts and spreadsheets. Section 3, the industrial base. Slow bleed. All right, let's talk about the beating heart behind all the strategy, posturing, and high-level rhetoric. The defense industrial base. This is the machine behind the machine. The web of manufacturers, engineers, small suppliers, and innovators who keep our military modern, our weapons reliable, and our supply chains intact. So many of these things things in our everyday life come from this. It's not glamorous, no parades for the machinists cutting titanium parts or the technicians soldering circuit boards for F-35s. But without them, America's military edge turns into a PowerPoint fantasy. And when the government shuts down, that machine starts to seize up a little. Here's how it happens. Most of these companies, from Lockheed Martin down to the three-person shop machining drone components in Dayton, rely on federal contracts, milestone payments, and regulatory oversight. When appropriations freeze, so do reimbursements. Invoices stack up. Small firms start burning cash. And the big primes shift focus to projects with guaranteed funding. The flow of parts, the flow of materials, and innovation slow, not because of incompetence, but because the fuel source, federal funding, just got shut off. Now you might think, okay, that's temporary. Once the government reopens, everything starts moving again. Of course. but not quite. Supply chains aren't like light switches. Once you stall them, you introduce lag, cost overruns, and inefficiencies that echo for months. Critical programs get delayed, testing windows get missed, and production lines have to restart under higher costs. Every time this happens, the industrial base takes a punch. And unlike Washington, it doesn't recover with a press conference. And then there's oversight, vacuum. When the Department of Defense, or the War Department, when the civilian workforce gets furloughed, the inspectors, auditors, and contracting officers who keep an eye on the cost and performance, they aren't there. That means projects drift without accountability, a slow bleed of time and money that compounds every day the shutdown drags on. And the worst part, the talent drain. The engineers and scientists behind the next generation of hypersonic propulsion or quantum-resistant encryption. They don't wait around while politicians fight and bicker. They get poached. Private sector, foreign opportunities, or simply burnout. They walk. Every shutdown tells them your mission doesn't matter as much as our politics. That's a dangerous message to send to the people who literally build our future. And let's not forget, the small and mid-tier manufacturers. These are the companies that form the connective tissue of our defense ecosystem. Many of them operating on, razor-thin margins. A few delayed payments can mean layoffs, lost capacity, or completely shuttering their doors. When they go down, you don't just lose a vendor, you lose a capability. A precision gear manufacturer in Ohio or a circuit board fabricator in Arizona doesn't magically reappear when Congress gets its act together. That's institutional decay disguised as fiscal prudence. This is what I mean when I say the shutdown is more than politics. It's a national security event. Every day the industrial base idles, America's deterrent weakens. Deterrent weakens. Because readiness isn't just about troops and weapons. It's about the invisible networks that build, maintains, and evolves them. The irony here is almost poetic. We talk endlessly about resilience and redundancy and readiness in our defense strategies, but the system itself isn't resilient to its own government's dysfunction. The most advanced military in history can still be slowed by the oldest problem in politics. Freaking gridlock. And that's the part that should worry everyone. Our adversaries aren't watching our weapons, they're watching our will. And every time we shut down, we tell them it's negotiable. Outro, power perception and the price of paralysis. So here's where all this lands. Every time Washington grinds to a halt, we're not just seeing a political disagreement. We're watching a stress fracture form in the foundation of our national strength. And it's not the loud parts that hurt us the most. It's the quiet ones, the deferred testing, the paused contracts, the analysts who leave for steadier ground, the small manufacturers who can't weather one more late payment. Those are the invisible scars a shutdown leaves behind. But here's the thing, America's strength has never come from perfect leadership or smooth governance. It's come from resilience, the ability to take a punch, recalibrate, and keep moving forward. We've stumbled through recessions, wars, and more than a few political circus acts. And somehow, the Republic still stands. What's different now is the tempo. The global competition isn't waiting for us to figure it out anymore. Every hour of dysfunction gives someone else an edge. That means national security isn't just a Pentagon problem. It's a citizen problem. It's on all of us to demand competence, not chaos, to expect leadership that can debate fiercely but still deliver outcomes. Because strength abroad starts with stability at home, and we can't project deterrence if we can't even project discipline. If there's one takeaway from this episode, it's this. The next time you hear shutdown, don't think about closed parks or delayed paychecks. Think about readiness delayed, innovation paused, and perception weaponized. The cost isn't just economic, it's strategic, and that's a bill our enemies are happy to see us pay. But I'll say this, hope isn't gone. The American experiment still has something every rival nation envies, the ability to self-correct. We argue, we clash, we stall, but we also rebuild. The trick is remembering that unity isn't built through agreement. It's built through accountability, which is something that is lacking greatly. And the longer we treat dysfunction as normal, the harder that rebuild becomes. So, as always, stay sharp, stay informed, and remember, power doesn't come from policy alone. It comes from people who refuse to accept decay as the status quo. If this episode hit home, I'm asking for you to share it with someone who still thinks the shutdown is just another budget fight. Follow Full Spectrum Frontiers on your favorite platform and leave a quick review. It really does help this mission grow. Until next time, I'm Bennett Tanton, and this is Full Spectrum Frontiers. Stay ready, stay grounded, and keep your eyes on the full spectrum.
Carry the fire through shadows and storm. Voices of yesterday guiding us on. Echoes of duty, the call we still hear. Building tomorrow with courage, not fear. Stand your ground, keep the watch through the night. Guarding tomorrow where freedom's alight. Through every trial, the truth will endure. Full spectrum frontiers, steady and sure. From fields of the past to horizons unknown, the seeds that we plant are the future we own. Stories of valor, of lessons we've learned, a legacy carried, a torch ever burned. Stand your